Alright, hi everyone. It's Prince of Asphodel. So, I haven't posted in a little while, and that's kind of because I've been going through some side projects with some of my characters that I didn't really think were important enough to post, but it's going to take me a long time to get back to something that I want to talk to, so I figure, no, maybe I should comment on some of the things that I've been doing, and maybe this will still be helpful to some players. Because, one of the things I've been working on is this build you see on the screen right now with my DPS character, Daznius. So I've been a rogue for a long time, 2-weapon fighting, dex based, and one of the things that I wanted to do as I got through more past lives, because I've been farming racials, and I have a lot of epic past lives as well, but what I was missing is a little bit of utility, a little bit of extra survivability, and one of the things that I realized I was missing was more heal amplification, and what better way to get heal amplification than get some Paladin past lives. But I am really cheap when it comes to switching builds. I don't like to do it because you have to go get new gear, you have to go switch out all of your filigrees, get new weapons, and I didn't want to deal with that. So I took the cheap method out and I just built a 2-weapon fighting rogue. That is a paladin. So that's really what I'm doing here. Now, the reason that I took so long and kind of really hesitated to post anything about this is because, well, for the last few videos I've been talking a lot about, meta DPS, what you want to do if you want to keep up with some of the heavier hitters out there in the game, and this really isn't too much of a min-maxed build. I do try to min-max it, but in terms of the philosophy behind this build, it just isn't going to hit the numbers I think that you really want. So I wanted something that would really force me to change the least about my build, and I did manage to keep the gear and the weapons intact, and some of those need to be changed anyway, and I did make some mistakes along the way, but I've been getting comments every now and then when I show off something that people are interested in seeing the builds that I'm using for their own purposes. Not everyone is looking for the top DPS, but they are trying to fill some past lives, and they want some good ideas about how to do it, and there are a million different ways to get Paladin past lives. I have a Paladin Archer, you can make a Paladin tank, of course. You can make Paladin DPS, a single weapon fighting, two-handed fighting. Those are popular ones. You can play a Vanguard, you can play an Inquisitive, for goodness sake. You can even play a pure healer as a Paladin, which is, there's just a lot you can do. And I chose to go to weapon fighting because I wanted a dex-based 2-weapon fighting build, and the way that I chose to do it was to mix it with Ranger and mix it with Tempest. And there were a couple of problems that I arrived at, but it does seem to be performing okay, even in High Reaper and even in raids. Not the best. It is still lacking some things, and its DPS does fall off a bit compared to Rogue. But I'm still pretty pleased with where it got to. So I don't know. I guess in case anyone wanted some ideas, some fuel, or just an insight into how I go about building builds that maybe there isn't a lot of information about, this is kind of where it's at. This is the purpose of this. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about Daznius' current build, just getting that out of the way. This isn't like top of the meta or anything, but it's also just like a goofy idea paired with trying to have the best endgame build fundamentals as well, which I think is an interesting thought experiment. So that's what I'm going to show you here. Alright everyone, so here is the gist of the build that I'm working with. I'm not gonna lie, I've had to re-record this part several times because I've been talking and realized something about the build that I wanted to change, and I didn't want to do that on the spot. Hopefully this is the last time. Okay, let's get the main things out of the way. The build is the following: 14 Paladin, 6 Ranger. It originally came from an idea that someone had given on Reddit. There were not very many details. I kind of pieced things together myself. So, how does this compare to the Rogue build? It's actually not too bad. The stats, you can see the dexterity is a little bit lower. The saves are comparable. The reflex saves are a little lower. The fortitude saves are quite a bit higher. Doublestrike ends up just right, just where you want it. Caps melee power 260s, not great, but with the Righteous Command, we go to 275. That's a bit better there. Now, here's a little quiz. In DDO, DPS builds go for 14 Paladin levels for what reason? See if you can pause and figure it out if you don't know. The reason you go to exactly 14 Paladin levels is because that opens the 4th level Paladin spell, at least one, and usually that spell is Holy Sword. This makes it so that you don't have to get your +1 competence bonus to crit, threat range, and multiplier from your enhancement trees, and therefore gives you a lot of flexibility about what to do with said trees. Now, for a while here, I actually wasn't even using Holy Sword this life, I was using Zeal. I since changed that, and I'll explain why in a bit, but Holy Sword is extremely powerful, and a lot of the really good bonuses come from Paladin spells. Angel Skin giving a lot of defensive bonuses, you get offensive bonuses from Righteous Command and Prayer, and of course, Holy Sword is the only source of crit profile from a spell in the game, so it's really, really interesting. As for the 6 Ranger levels, the main benefit is the enhancements. So, like I mentioned in the introduction, I was basically just copying my rogue build, right? So I was dexterity based, I was 2-weapon fighting. Now, I don't have any rogue here, so what am I doing? What I'm doing is going to tier 5 in Tempest to get this dual perfection. And what it does is, I believe this is the only source in the game that does this, and this is to add your full attribute to your damage modifier, from your damage modifier to your offhand attacks, which is cool. That's a boost in DPS, because your offhand attacks are no longer getting a reduction just because they're offhand, which is really cool, and this is the reason that Tempest can kind of hang with other DPS builds if built just right, which is cool. And of course, I'm not a pure ranger, I'm a paladin build. Now, there are 2 different ways that you can build this build based on what I can see here. You can either go daggers and kukris, or you can not go daggers and kukris. I chose to go daggers, of course, because the whole reason I'm running this build is to not switch weapons. I have tons of weapons. I have filigrees on 3 different daggers that I was not about to go unslot just to come back to them later. So, the difference is I dipped into Vistani. So when I mentioned earlier that in my spells, I used to be using Zeal instead of Holy Sword, this was because you can get your crit profile right here with Plays with Knives. But I realized that I had such strong Doublestrike, 81%, when combined with Rapid Slash, which basically gives you 100% Double Strike with 100% uptime. Because unlike the Reaper Strike, this works outside of Reaper, and its cooldown is the exact same as its duration, which means you basically always have 20% morale bonus to Double Strike, which means this 81% Double Strike is practically 101%. So 100 is cap, so the Double Strike is good. And as a result, I didn't need Zeal, based on the decisions I took to get this much Double Strike. So I switched it for Holy Sword. That allowed me to take some points out of here, because this build is really starved for enhancement points. Luckily, this fixed a lot of my issues, which is cool. Let me go from left to right, though, when I'm breaking down the trees here. You see the Aasimar Scourge all the way on the left side? I'm going to go into my class here. If you're trying to build this, any class works. And Aasimar Scourge has its problems. It also has its benefits. Here are the benefits. The benefits are you start at level 15, so you don't have to deal with the early game. That's pretty cool. Additionally, one problem that it avoids is you don't have to use that weird +1 heart trick to get rid of your first level, because it starts as one of the 2 classes that you mix here. It starts as Ranger, which is very, very cool. And finally, the last benefit is the past life it grants is just one that I wanted. It just gives 2% Double Strike, so that's pretty neat. The downside is the racial tree. I don't know if this is so much a downside. All of these 7 points are free. I just have 7 racial action points to spend, and so that's where they went. If I had 0 racial action points, I wouldn't have spent anything in Aasimar Scourge. That tells you how important the racial trees are. Some races are better than others, but honestly, it's going to depend on how many racial points you have, because this build is really tight as far as the enhancements are concerned. If you don't use the dagger build, and sorry, I said daggers or kukris in the past, only daggers work because you can't get kukris as favored weapons. So kukris, which are usually stronger than daggers, they don't work for this build. You have to go daggers. And if you don't go Vistani, I would recommend going Warhammers under Onatar. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Let's look at what Tempest gives you. I used to go over to Core 3 to get Graceful Death, but in one of the last updates, I believe it was 76, they changed weapon finesse, and the weapons that were finessable now simply use dexterity to hit and damage naturally, which is great. You can forgo this, and I almost forwent this as well. However, the 10% offhand strike chance is actually part of what I need to hit 100%, so I had to keep it. Otherwise, this wouldn't be that useful either. this line, just extra hidden damage. Haste boost, you could get this from Vistani. I just picked it up here. It's nice and easy. This entire line is basically for the dodge cap right here. All 9 of these points. Dodge cap is not super easy to come by. It makes me have 30 standing dodge, and I can get a little bit more dodge cap in Reaper, going up to 32. And if I had capped my Reaper trees, I'd be at 33 from the capstone of Grim Barricade. So overall, respectable. Holds up to the Rogue because of that. This button is basically my substitute for Uncanny Dodge. It's not quite as good as Uncanny Dodge, Elaborate Parry, but honestly, going from 30 dodge to over here, what does it send me to? Oh my goodness. It is rejecting the use, but it sends me to like 65 because it's taking my dexterity modifier, which you can see over here is 34. It's right next to the base dex bonus, so it sends me to like 64. If the dex is a little higher, it goes to 65. That's really good dodge. That's what I'm trying to say. Now, this is the button that is the whole reason for the tree, so it's really, really good. I didn't get too many of the other things in tier 5, and I used to get fewer when I went all the way to core 4 in Vistani. I realized I didn't have to do that, so the thing that I wanted the most was this +1 W, and that's just about it. Now, here in Knight of the Chalice, I really wanted Exalted Smite because it basically synergizes with the destiny that I sort of forced myself into. Exalted Smite, getting the 3rd tier, gives you +2 multiplier and threat range for this attack, making it a very good attack, and I believe it actually hits an area of effect as well, which is really nice for 2-weapon fighting. For 2-handed fighting, you have strike through, right? So AoE is not that important, but if you're single or 2-weapon fighting, you really want that. Hence these 2 abilities, Exalted Cleave and Exalted Smite. And Rapid Slash, while it also doesn't say so, I do believe it also applies a area of effect. The other things you get from this tree are a good Imbue stance, possibly the best in the game, because it's light damage, nothing resists that, and it scales with 200% melee power, so that's really good. You get some Imbue dice from the cores. You randomly get Greater Restoration from this ability from Paladin, Remove Disease. I'm not sure why that's in the DPS tree, but that's so strong. And yeah, that's about it. And finally, you can't skip out on the 13 points in Horizon Walker. I went 14 because I had 1 extra, so I got the 3rd core, but really it's for the trance. No DPS build can be without its trance, and if you're a dexterity build, you want the dexterity trance. It's the easiest one to scale. So that is where all of those points are coming from. Technically, you could try and save a whole bunch of points here and just get Divine Might here and scale off of charisma, but then you would need a weapon swap. You'd need your charisma to not be abysmal like mine is. It just wasn't worth it for me. So spend 13 points it was from Horizon Walker, and that is what makes the enhancements really, really tight. Now, the Epic Destinies, let me get to that real quick. I'm basically using the same trees I was on Rogue, with the exception of I had Fury of the Wild instead of Legendary Dreadnought, and for most of this life I was actually on Dreadnought. The reason I went Fury of the Wild is twofold. First, Area of Effect is really good, Quick Cutter is really good, but more importantly, I noticed that I was sitting at 90% offhand strike chance, so I switched to this to get my offhand strike chance higher. And of course I get other really good stuff like Unconsciousness range. Primal Scream is okay, but if you're in raid, someone's going to have the better Primal Scream to hit you with anyway. I managed to upgrade Quick Cutter over here because Quick Cutter was nerfed. It used to give you its full value just by spending these points over here. Now you have to get a few of them back higher up the tree, which is totally fine. Shadow Dancer, really, really simple. It's the best splash tree if you're going to tier 3. It gives you everything: Doublestrike, Armor Piercing, Sneak Dice, Dimension Door, Improved Evasion, Magic Missile Immunity. Whole bunch of things in this tree that are really, really nice. Now, Divine Crusader is my main tree that I go tier 5 in and use my Epic Mantle in. Like I mentioned before, if you're going to be a DPS, you really want the +1 W for melee, and you get that from either the Mantle of Divine Crusader, Legendary Dreadnought, or Grandmaster of Flowers. And I chose to go with this one because here's the downside of the Aasimar Scourge that I totally forgot to mention when I was talking about the race. Yeah, you can't worship the Blood of Vol, which means you can't use daggers as your favored weapon. So the only way that you can get that is by using this ability right here. This allows you to use any of the gods' favored weapons as your favored weapon, which means you can't even use the Paladin's Imbue toggle until you're in Epics, which is really funny. You can technically solve this problem and stop there and take tier 5 in a different tree, but none of them are really perfect, in my humble opinion, so I didn't do that. You could have messed around with Fury, gotten the full heal off of, Primal Scream, gone up here, I guess gotten some stuff. I don't know, it might have worked, but because you're a Paladin, yeah, well, I'll explain this a little bit more. You have a lot of Exalted Smite synergies over here, which kind of justifies the use of Knight of the Chalice. So this gives you a nice heal with Exalted Smite. This gives you more smite charges. This gives you a buff that you apply. Really short buff, but you apply it to your entire party. It's really good for raids. You have some nice defensive bonuses in here. You have a button that raises the whole raid. And this is just free damage because you're going to have Embodiment of Law. You can't take Harbinger of Chaos like most DPS builds do because you are a Paladin, and Paladins are lawful good, which means that your Enhancement that gives you the your feat that gives you +2 imbue dice, my goodness. You can't take it, so you take the +2 imbue dice from Embodiment of Law, which requires you to be lawful. And as a result, it synergizes with this tier 5 and not with the one in Fury of the Wild. Hopefully I'm not going too fast. This is just a nice little, a debuff, which synergizes with the fact that you're already debuffing a lot as a 2-weapon fighter. Even in a small party, you are the one providing LGS Dust and LGS Ooze, and this is just a little bit of gravy you provide. Albeit very slow stacks of vulnerability, it only applies on crits, but you're hitting twice, so it's fast enough to get the job done. So that's pretty cool. I do have 2 Epic Strikes. I use this one when no one else has Consecration and I'm in a big party with a lot of grouped up melee fighters, or if you need a little bit of tick healing, whereas this is what you use for faster clear speed. Lastly, I want to talk about the feats. This is going to be the last thing, because at first I took the entire mobility line here, so that's dodge, mobility, spring attack. The spring attack line is what I should have said. And I took the entire 2-weapon fighting line, and I took improved critical. And then I got precision a little later, I delayed it. Now, I didn't realize until later, because this build existed before one of the last updates that actually made it so that Cleave and Great Cleave now provide critical profile bonuses, which makes them really good feats. So I'm going to put up on the screen the list of updated feats that I would recommend to use. Just to fit Cleaves and Great Cleaves in there, which might be worth it. It might not. I already have a lot of Area of Effect. I'm not entirely sure. But the thing is, even when I took the 2-weapon fighting line, I ended up with some feats that I didn't really know what to do with. So, yeah, I don't know. I think I'll mess around with that next time I'm on this build and let you guys know how that's going, because I did get some random feats like Child of Faith for like +2 to hidden damage. One that could have been... That was literally in place of an epic feat, of which I only took 2, Overwhelming Critical and Eerie Aim. This is not a build that goes up in DPS with Patience, unfortunately, so your options are kind of thin. And Doublestrike, of course, this completely depends on how much Doublestrike you need. Here, because I did get rid of Zeal, the spell, it turns out that this was justified, and so lots of different things shift around in your build. If you change one thing, you kind of have to change others to not leak damage. I could have gone for Titan's Blood here instead of Elemental Dice. I chose to get a tiny bit more DPS because that is my job at the end of the day, to DPS, and I think I do an okay job of it. The videos at the very beginning were in some public raids and one Reaper 10 quest that is not fairly recent, so I'm putting in some work, and that was before some of the changes that I've made to this build. Would I recommend this build? Yeah, I think so, but I wouldn't, if you're chasing like the top DPS and that is your one goal, I would stay away from it. I would build something like an 1811 Shatterkai Barbarian. I would build something like Pure Assassin Rogue. I would build something like maybe a single weapon fighting Paladin would be pretty strong. Maybe one of those hand axe builds. I think this build will fall behind some of those others that I mentioned, but not too far behind. So if you're someone that's looking for some quirky dexterity-based Paladin like I was, this isn't that bad of an option. You'll still be helpful in raids. You will still be helpful in High Reapers. You have the same problems that Rogue does. You don't have very consistent crowd control methods. But other than that, I was pretty pleased with it. So the last thing I'm going to say is, if you don't go Vistani, I would recommend using Warhammers and using Onatar as your god, because there's a really good Warhammer that drops from Den of Vipers called Audion the Shattering Way, I believe is what it's called. And then your offhand can just be, I don't know, Dinobone or Undying Age or some Warhammer that also applies really good, combines really good base dice with really good effects. I think that could also be really, really spicy, and maybe it's something I'll mess around with later. Longswords are going to be another decent option. You might have to go a little bit farther into Knight of the Chalice just to get the effect that gives you Knight's Training. Not sure if that'll be worth it. Not sure, honestly. You could also use this build as not dexterity based, possibly. I haven't really toyed around with that idea. You could still be charisma, but you still need enough dexterity to get greater 2-weapon fighting, so I'm not really sure at the end of the day if that's worth it. But at this point, I'm just talking about things that I don't know yet, so that's a clear sign that I should stop talking. If you do have any additional questions about this build, I will be happy to answer them in the comments if I can get to them. Otherwise, I really just wanted to show you this. I fell off the face of the earth. I didn't really want to talk about what I was doing, but I figured, hey, it might help someone who is interested in making something like this. So that's what this is for. So hope you guys enjoyed seeing what I'm up to, and I will hopefully catch you guys very, very soon. This has been Prince of Asphodel, so I'll see you next time.